You're listening to the Better for America podcast, presented by AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens.
Hello, everybody. I'm Rebecca Weber, and this is your AMAC podcast, Better for America. Today, I'm here with Robert Bobby Charles. We're back again. Today's segment, we're calling Reb and Rob on Truth and History. I'm Reb for short. My family calls me Reb, and a lot of people I work with, so it sounds fitting to match us up that way, Bobby. For those of you who don't know Bobby or are joining for the first time, Robert Charles served in the Reagan and Bush White House, Bush 41 White Houses. He was Assistant Secretary of State under Colin Powell. And, in this capacity, Bobby oversaw really national security and has a tremendous amount of experience and insight. So I look forward to hearing a lot and talking with Bobby this morning on sort of what we're seeing out there and how things are changing right before our eyes and what we can do about it. Bobby is also our national spokesman. And Bobby, it's been great, the work that you've been doing on national radio, on national television. Thank you again for joining us today.
Well, it is always my privilege. And, Rebecca, they don't always give me full credit, but when I'm on Fox and Friends or anything else in the morning, I always think I'm really there as AMAC's spokesperson for all of those 2.3 million and hopefully someday 30 million Americans who understand that America's future really counts and that we've got a chance to shape it. And we have an obligation, honestly, to shape it. You and I talk about veterans a lot, and AMAC works awfully hard for veterans. We have a large percentage of our population as membership, obviously, who are tied to it. But, I walk through Arlington Cemetery now and again. It's right local here to Washington. Some days I'm just frustrated with the world and I go walk through that cemetery. And I have a lot of relatives buried there back through to its beginning. And it reminds me, and I guess this comment maybe reminds others, I wish every school child could walk through a military cemetery and just say, maybe we have to be equal to our time. Maybe there's something bigger than us that lays on our shoulders that says, it's time to get out and do whatever it is I can do in my time to carry forward the privileges and the rights and the obligations that and the wonderful world that was handed to us by those who served, like your father served, obviously. And was very distinguished in his service. So that's part of what animates me when I get up to do these media efforts.
Well, Bobby, it's great that you say that. I love solutions and I love taking action because I think a lot of people are frustrated. They're seeing our country literally change before our own very eyes. I'll give some examples. There are corporations that are now training employees not to use certain words. For example, you can no longer say hip, hip, hooray, because, you cannot say, let's have a brown bag lunch. You've got to say lunch and learn or a bucket lunch or some other word. It's gotten so, it's almost, you have to laugh. I mean, sometimes I laugh over these things because it's just so unbelievable. And I think when people see what's happening and everything from, these illegal migrants that are coming in, schools that aren't opening when science says that schools should be open, all kinds of things that are, I think, stripping away rights from individual American citizens, and we're feeling it. People want to do something. People really want to be able to take action. And so I think joining AMAC is certainly a great place to start because I can't emphasize it enough. And I don't say this as sort of to be salesy or to try to get people to join even. It's just that I believe so deeply and know that we have gotten, our muscle has grown because our membership has grown. And when we can go to Washington and say, we have 5 million members, we can get so much more work done because we're up against bigger, stronger lobbying groups that are not really fighting on behalf of the 75 million people who voted for Donald Trump. So we recognize that a lot of work needs to be done, and we can do it. There's strength in numbers. So joining AMAC is a great place to start, and then taking advantage of our toolbox that we give to members, which essentially says this is how to set up a town hall meeting, or this is how to contact your elected representatives to send a letter that you oppose a certain bill. But I'm just going to tell you where my head was last night. I'm thinking, as I'm drifting to sleep, I'm thinking about how different the world feels in just a short, 4 or 5 months, really, since the election in November. And I say to myself, how could it be that almost overnight there is a message that we're hearing that makes us feel that you're penalized for hard work, for example. You are better off depending on government, and government is the answer to your problems. Will solve your problems. And I'm thinking about, how is it that people are just sort of like either not hearing the message, they're hearing it and they're not doing much about it. So maybe they think it's going to go away, but I think I want to just say, you mentioned to me, and I read in an article that you posted, you said, Rebecca, these are the things that we've seen before the very beginnings of socialism. So can is it that easy that a country like Venezuela, who was at one time a rich country, can suddenly become so desperate, where the citizens just literally are starving? How does something like that happen? And is it happening here in America?
Yeah. So let me balance. It's an excellent question. It's actually it's really sort of the question of the hour. What is happening? How fast is it happening? And what does it require of us to respond? Let me sort of unpack that question from the beginning of your comment. So self-censorship is the beginning of the way that those who are centralizing power begin to work. They intimidate you. They seem. I mean, I've seen this all over the world, but it can happen in any society. Even though we are institutionally a strong society, we have historically been able to repulse this. This is not the first time that folks on the left or even on the right have tried to sort of take away the 98% center. Or the 75% or the 85% center. And so what we're experiencing right now is there is a tremendous government overreach happening. And we saw this in the wind. We've seen it in the wind the last decade. There's been an effort to reach for more and more power, and it is a zero-sum game. Individual liberties go away at the exact same rate at which government usurps the power to control you. So, go back and read George Orwell's 1984, very, very provocative book, and everybody thought never happened. Dystopian society where everything is controlled by Big Brother. People said, well, that will never happen. Well, actually, what they did is they began to change the language. He called it newspeak or doublespeak. And what you're seeing right now is a lot of that same phenomenon occurring where corporate, we could list the companies. It's a list from ceiling to floor, who have begun to rethink everything from how they describe themselves to what they allow their employees to do, to what they'll sell, to how they brand. Why? Because they're self-censoring, okay? And self-censorship is the beginning of the process by which people are intimidated. Fear rises, fear of the government. The government's supposed to work for us. We're not supposed to be working for it or afraid of it. Normal criminal justice, the laws that we think of as morally underwritten and by consent we agree to, is a small body of laws that our founders thought of in terms of limited government. They keep us from killing each other. They keep us able to have maximum freedom with maximum ability to get along with each other. When you then allow the government to centralize and become more and more powerful, to pull in like a magnet all of the other rights that historically have belonged to states, 10th Amendment, go read the 10th Amendment. It's very straightforward. And it says that if it isn't given explicitly to the federal government, it belongs to the people or to the states. Okay, then go back. And so what have they done to kind of twist that? They've taken the Commerce Clause and the Supremacy Clause, and now they're trying with HR1 and S1 to literally suck in the entire election process to the federal level. And so the first thing I'm going to say is that what you're describing, whether it's describing all these new training programs that people have to go through, or the way that people describe themselves, taking their logos apart, trying to essentially rewrite themselves to be consistent with the left. All of that is the beginning of self-censorship. So the first thing I would tell everybody to do is, look, if you have an opinion, you need to know that the First Amendment protects you in that opinion. And I mean virtually any opinion. As long as you're not promoting violence or the overthrow of the government, you got an opinion and you have the right to speak it. And that's also true at the corporate level. And I think a lot of mom and pop shops, people at the lower, smaller companies say to themselves, I'm not going to bow and curtsy to this new movement. I'm just going to be myself. Well, that's the right attitude, because that's the way America was made. Now let's go to your question of whether this is socialism and how fast it moves. Having spent a lot of time in countries, and we can talk more about it, that were overrun by the left, really by the left. So it can be an organized Soviet-style left. It can be a very disorganized, impoverished Laos-type left. It can be a very all-controlling China-type left. It can be a Venezuelan dictatorial left, Cuba. Or it can be the right, by the way. You can get fascism is just as bad. It's just the same place on the clock. You just get there the different way. So what are those philosophies all turn on? They turn on centralized control by a big government and suppression of your opinion and my opinion and our right to worship and our right to free trade and our right to all those free markets, all those things that amount to freedom. And what is our obligation? Our obligation is to think, okay, what is it that I can do? Ronald Reagan at Normandy gave one of the most moving speeches I have ever heard. And one of the things that he said there, and you can find it online, he referenced a young World War I officer who died in combat named Triptow was his last name. That's all I recall of it. But the thing was, they found on his body afterwards a small journal. And in his journal, it said, in effect, I go to my battle station every day on behalf of freedom, imagining that the entire project of the future of America and freedom in the world depends on me. And if we go with that principle, and Reagan's voice cracked when he said it because it meant a lot to him. He lost enough friends in World War II to know. It depends on me in my community. Go to my school board, go to my local representative, go to my state legislature, tell them, I want the Constitution upheld. Do a little research and see that H.R. 1 is going to, for example, that's now S1, it's going to destroy the process by which we think of controlling our elections at the state level. It's going to take everything to the federal level, make it one-party control, make the FEC one-party control, create two new states, two new senators out of D.C. It's going to mandate no IDs anywhere for voting. It's going to mandate mail-in voting. It's going to mandate out-of-precinct voting. Gosh, at the state level, at least, you can say, I want that stopped. I don't want that to happen to my America. I don't want you trying to change the DNA of the country that got handed to me and I'm supposed to be and will be handing on to my children and grandchildren. So the obligation really, Rebecca, falls on us to be informed, not to lose courage. I'll end up with just this little segment with one thought from Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill, golly, another incredible time period in world history and American history supporting Great Britain and ultimately helping win World War II. I mean, we really did win World War II and saved the free world. But during the Battle of Britain, he was heavily, people thought, no way we can win this. And Churchill would do these fireside chats and say, we're going to win this. We're going to win this. Keep your heart strong, keep your courage up. And when everything was over, he reminded people that victory is not final and defeat is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts.
Ah, that's great. Those are good words. For those people that may not be really following the news, right? The details around the news. I just want to point out that this stuff that we're talking about, self-censorship, we're seeing it across corporations, right? That are, I guess, some say, well, they probably have a huge team of attorneys that are, consulting with, the stockholders and the executive team and to the board of directors and saying, hey, let's play it this way, or let's, appeal to different groups. But I think what's really happening is, I think they're doing it initially out of fear because they don't want to be, labeled, as being anti this or that. God forbid, right? You have a belief and you stand up for it. But just some quick examples, which I think is ridiculous, like cream of wheat, that historic hot cereal. They took their black chef off the packaging. Nestle's Eskimo Pie ice cream changed its name for people values. Nabisco Oreos partnered with a transgender group to produce pride packaging with 3 different packs: she, her, he, him, and they, them. Rock bands are changing their name. Sports teams are changing their name, and the list goes on, as you mentioned earlier. And I've actually taken this from one of your articles. I encourage people to go to our website. The article is entitled "Accelerating Corporate Self-Censorship," and you really get a good flavor for what's really happening. It's really going on. And so then you say to yourself, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, I just want to mention, you mentioned a couple of things, and like Churchill's attitude and his relentless perseverance.
Yes.
His willingness to not see a failure as total defeat, but to continue to get back up again. And where I always say, well, how do you teach that, and where do you learn that? And that really comes from the home. It comes from the home. You mentioned my father. I was very fortunate to have parents who said to me, when I hurt myself physically or emotionally, let's make sure that pain goes away, but get back up and go back out there.
Rebecca,
brush off, you know what I mean? Get back up. So you need self-discipline. You need resilience. You need belief, and you need to believe in yourself and your own opinions more than you do in the opinions that someone else is trying to feed you. And that, I think, you develop those basic skills in the home, and hopefully reinforced with really good teachers who too say, try again. Believe in yourself. And if we don't have that, and we're raising a youth that is second guessing, that doesn't have, that doesn't believe that holding an opinion or that values are important.
Rebecca, you've hit on so much there that is so important, and it is a message for families. It's a message for individuals. It's a message for teachers. There's just a distillate of truth in what you just said there. So let me kind of again offer a little bit of expansion on that. First, Winston Churchill was all about, as was Ronald Reagan, as have most conservatives been through the history of time. Edmund Burke was all about truth. And one of the things, again, I'm going to foul up the quote, but the gist of Churchill one time, he said, you can kick it, you can step on it, you can trash it, you can try to destroy it, but when it's all over, the truth is still right there. And that's the truth that we have today. And what is that truth we're trying to teach our kids and go beyond that, and hope society fully re-imbibes of, re-understands? It's that you can choose to be a victim, or you can choose not to be a victim. You can choose to be dependent on others, or you can choose to be self-reliant. You can choose to decide that the world is too big for you and you're going to run away from it, or you can say, I'm going to turn into the wind and I'm going to tack up this lake the way that you would in a sailboat. And I think that part of what you're also describing is a kind of a taught, you mentioned the word reliance, or not self-reliance, but the idea of resilience. And resilience, believe it or not, is the one word in the Navy, for example, and I spent 10 years as a Navy reservist intelligence, resilience is the one word you're really taught. Everybody has a breaking point. Everybody has issues they confront. Everybody has adversity, but it's whether you pick yourself up and go forward. And by the way, as a society, you have to do that. You have to say collectively, look, we are aware of what our rights are, and we are not going to allow them to be taken away. And we're going to speak about that in a Norman Rockwell sort of way. Go look at this free speech poster in World War II about, how you stand up in your town meeting and you speak your piece. I'm also reminded, I happen to be reading an autobiography, actually, of George Patton right now. And, George Patton unfortunately died after the war, very quickly after the war, but they published posthumously all of his notes that amounted to his autobiography. And he would come upon commanders in the field and who were up against it, and they were very discouraged. And, the war was not as easily won as everybody thinks. And Patton was just unbelievable. His attitude was, I know what's right. I know I'm going to win, and I need to never stop moving forward. And so he would come to a battle commander who said, gosh, I'm not sure I can take that hill, or I don't think I can do it. And I'll never forget, just in the last week reading this biography, he came upon a commander and he used two examples. He said, he was a great student of history. And he said, go back to the Civil War in the United States. And he's talking to a commander out on the battlefield. And he summoned this and said, look, Grant was the one who said after Vicksburg or after one of his great wins, he said, look, you always get to a point in a battle where you think you're losing. Okay. Both commanders get to that point. The one who wins is the one that keeps fighting with every. And then he used Lee as an example and flipped the whole thing for this commander in the field and said, and Lee said at one point, they asked him after a battle that he had won, and he won a lot of battles before he lost. They said, why did you go on the assault in that situation? And he said, because I didn't have the energy to just sit still and be on defense. I needed to be on offense. Yeah. And so you win in the discussion with a neighbor by using another principle that Churchill talked about. Churchill said courage on the individual level and on the international level. Courage takes standing up and speaking, and it also takes sitting down and listening. And so the stronger we are, the more we have the capacity to magnanimously listen and to speak truth, because we know we're on the right side of history. The Bill of Rights is the embodiment of natural law. People 1,000 years from now are going to love free speech. We just have to keep defending it so that they get it.
Yeah, that is great. I think that I just want to encourage people to pay attention to a lot of people are so busy taking care of their families, just, working more than one job. Folks are, concerned about their personal health, their personal finances. And so sometimes it isn't pleasant to pay attention to the things that sort of, you think, that's just one crazy person, or that's just one bad corporation that's done that, or that's just one bad leader. But if we pay attention, I encourage that. Also, sit down with your kids. My kids are young adults, and I enjoy sitting with them and just sort of asking the question, what are you seeing out there, and what do you think of this and that? Because we need to encourage one another to not to abandon our beliefs out of fear. And a little bit of truth, Bobby, which you have in your article here, and I read it 3 or 4 times. Fear is driving people, corporations to self-censor. People are self-censoring. People are afraid to say what they would normally say in fear of being called a racist, or you name it, right? But that is how socialism works. Fear drives socialism. And I don't think I should feel bad if I want to, say hip, hip, hooray. And that doesn't make me a bad person, so I think that it's paying attention and reminding yourself, listening to the small voice in your head that says, this doesn't sound right, this doesn't feel right. And then what do? How do we change it? Well, we have to elect the right people in office. And so 2022 is going to be a very telling year. We'll be able to tell how much the American people are really paying attention. Yeah. Because we've got to get better people in Washington to lead. I want to ask you, just if I could shift, I have a couple of things. I want to talk about our Second Amendment, but before I jump into the Second Amendment, one of the things that really troubles me as a mother is the thought that we've got these children that are coming over unrelated. I spoke with Congressman Gosar yesterday, who has the 4th congressional district in Arizona. So he himself has been down to the southern border, and he said to me, Rebecca, he said there was a caravan, I believe it's 11 kids between the ages of 11 and 17, brought over by coyotes, and the Border Patrol found the morning after pill that these youngsters were apparently forced to take or had been given. So you know that they're being abused. They're being sexually abused. We know that there's human trafficking, right? So we can't pretend it doesn't happen, even though I can go home to my nice little house and put on my television and sort of block out the rest of the world just because it's not in my home at my doorsteps. I'm not doing the right thing to ignore it. We need to address it. We need to say, this is what's happening.
Yes.
Now, in follow-up to that, I found this morning in reading that the San Diego union teachers are teaching migrant students in person while American children only have remote learning in San Diego, despite this alarmingly high infection rate among these immigrant children. There were 700 unaccompanied minors who were transferred to the San Diego Convention Center. Of the 700, 82 tested positive for COVID, which is about 11% infection rate. Mm-hmm. So we can guess that's infection rate must be at about that or higher in older people. And the San Diego residents, by the way, have a 0.0018% infection rate. Yet the teachers union says their children cannot return to school.
Yeah.
So that doesn't make sense. And people, if I lived in this area and I'd be speaking out. I would be getting a hold of my neighbors and other parents to say, we've got to stand up and do something about this.
You point out two incredible ironies there, Rebecca, and there really are two, and they are incredible. And Americans, see them, and we want to be able to respond to them, and we want to be able to lean into this and say, hey, stop doing this. Which I think we should do at every level that we can do it. But the two ironies, of course, are that, the notion that the Biden folks are using as a sort of a template is, well, this is a compassionate thing to do because they want to come to America. Look, there are several billion people in the world who live in poverty and frankly are regularly up against it all over the world. I've spent months in India. I've spent time in the Far East. There's lots of folks that if you open the border, you might as well just send your mail-in ballots, by the way, to China if that's what you want to do. If it's all about voting, but it's a little facetious there. But the bottom line here is, it's ironic because it's not compassionate. Okay, it's not compassionate to the people trying to get here. They are regularly abused. I don't have the stats in front of me, but what you described there is not an exception. It is the rule. And so if you're going to let your child go and you're in Guatemala or Honduras or somewhere that you think you're subjecting them to terrible events that if they make it alive, and many don't, they're going to have to go through. So the Biden administration is responsible for encouraging that you're encouraging child abuse when you encourage caravans that are run by coyotes that are abusing particularly these girls, but all of them. I mean, the second thing is you're actually ironically damaging the American citizenry, and not just by bringing COVID or not just by bringing in kids that now have to be accommodated and encouraging to come here, but our fentanyl and heroin and cocaine interception rates are now through the roof. These folks, because the borders are effectively been largely reopened and ICE and CBP are up against it and DEA in terms of trying to control it, you've got an overflow into this country now of narcotics. And please understand, fentanyl doesn't come from the United States. Cocaine does not come from the United States. Heroin does not come from the United States. It comes from Mexico and China and Colombia. It comes north, okay? And it comes through all kinds of venues. But when you open the border, you're damaging American citizens, which is why last year we had a 20% uptick because of the combination of COVID causing people to look for escapism and now in the first 3 months of this year, this tremendous jump in the availability, you've seen a tremendous jump in overdoses. So the point I'm really trying to make is crime and overdoses and open borders, they all fade together, and in terms of kids, look, kids need to get back to school. They're facing a social separation issues that are going to have 20-year impacts on the country. So let's get beyond this idea that we're afraid of our shadow, and let's start unlocking the country and getting folks back to being as close to normal as they can be, and then actually refinding normal.
Thank you. Yeah. it does. It breaks my heart to hear the truth, what's really happening. And it's not us being mean to call it what it is. We're speaking the truth. The Biden administration is not doing the right thing. That is the truth. And as you say, it's clothed in compassion. Hey, well, we're America. We've got to let everybody in. There's a right way and a wrong way to do it. And this is the very, very wrong way.
That's
and the
right.
fact that he hasn't been down to the border is really shameful because we're smarter than that. And, people are affected. This is going to have a long-term negative impact on America. And so many of the Biden policies will. I want to encourage people. Another great thing, when you join AMAC, you get our magazine. The magazine is a bi-monthly magazine. So for folks that are just tuning in or listening, or if this recording has been shared by a friend or family member, consider joining, because you do get subscribed to the AMAC magazine. And we speak about a lot of the policies that are unfolding. Joe Biden's tax plan, we'll wait and see what's happening there. We know that he wants to tax people. He says, I won't tax you if you're earning under $400,000 a year, but he fails to tell you that, oh, by the way, if you're married and you and your spouse combined are earning over that, then yeah, your taxes will go up. But he wants to tax your guns, for example, and he's attacking our Second Amendment right. I want to shift over there. I know that there have been some new developments. It seems that with the Democrat-controlled House and the Senate, really, there's the margins there are so thin, right? That they're trying so hard to just cram through and push through these bills that are not good for America. And I say to myself, I was always taught, if it doesn't look right, if it doesn't sound right, if it doesn't smell right, if it doesn't feel right, it's not right. And what they're doing, going after our Second Amendment right to bear arms, to keep and bear arms, and labeling people that are in support of strong Second Amendment right, but also it kind of goes like this: strengthening the gun laws aren't going to prevent criminals from shooting people up because they don't follow the law to begin with.
Yeah,
so we're attacking this all backwards.
Yes, right.
Yeah, can you give us an update on what you perceive to be a threat against our Second Amendment right?
Yes. So great topic, great question, and a great moment in American history to be vigilant. Let's do it from an outer circle to an inner circle. This is a deflection. The notion that we're going to change the laws and that will correct society. Look, it is backwards. Okay, we have failed to. When I was growing up, every American, first of all, in the mid 1970s, 3/4 of all Americans owned firearms. 3/4 of all Americans own firearms, and roughly 400 million firearms out there today. You're not going to get rid of these firearms. They are possessed by people for several very concrete reasons, and 90%, 98% of them. I won't give you a percentage, but a huge number of them are law-abiding citizens. Most of them are law-abiding citizens. They buy a gun, they go through the background check, and they buy it for all kinds of reasons. They buy it for self-defense, defense of their family. They buy it so that they can go sporting, go shoot birds. They can shoot deer. They can go shoot it at a range. But they also buy it in kind of an intuitive way because they know that it is an element of self-preservation. It is an element of self-defense. And that, by the way, is the Second Amendment's main reason. The government was never meant to be in charge of liberty. Individuals were in charge of liberty, and they defended that liberty, at least in the abstract, and if ever needed in concrete form, as the revolution obviously showed us, that by holding firearms, and it deters abuses of the Fourth Amendment and the Fifth Amendment and the Sixth Amendment, particularly the Fourth Amendment, because the Fourth Amendment, of course, assures people that they are secure in their papers and homes. So what do bills like this HR 127 do? They immediately take away all of the presumptions and all the concrete elements of the Second Amendment. And we even have a retired, actually now I think he's deceased, but Supreme Court justice who just said to, in favor of all the Democrat positions, let's just get rid of the Second Amendment. Okay, well, that that really is ironic, because that's like pulling the piece out of the tower that the tower falls from. Why? Because without the Second Amendment, you can't defend the First Amendment and the Fourth Amendment and the Sixth Amendment and the 10th Amendment, because the Second Amendment is the idea that you have an insurance policy held in the hands of most Americans that you cannot come in and take away my rights. So if you boil it down for just a minute, these bills are really a deflection, and I really have two things to say there. The first is the bills themselves are an outrage. They allow the government to confiscate guns if you get found by a neighbor or believed by a neighbor to be depressed, or they think you're addicted, or a whole list of things. Okay, they force a government psychologist to examine you before you buy a gun. They have mandatory minimum penalties up to 35 years and some $100,000 if you don't get a license for an antique gun or other guns. They're an outrage. Okay. And you can go back and look, just Google HR 127, which is a sort of their template for how they're going to dismantle the Second Amendment. And God forbid they get rid of the legislative filibuster, which is why people should step up to that. That in the Senate requires 60 votes in order for any substantive bill to get to the floor. It's called a vote of cloture. Schumer wants to get rid of it. Biden wants to get rid of it. They're pressuring.
Only now, though. They only want to get rid of it now. They did not want to get rid of it 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
And if they get rid of it, all this legislation gets out on a Harris 51 vote margin, and they can pack the Supreme Court. So the reason that I'm concerned about the Second Amendment is that there is concrete effort now being made essentially to dismantle it. But there's a much bigger issue. And really, Rebecca, you nailed this earlier. The society itself needs to re-examine what it means to be responsible. We train kids on cars. We say, don't use a car as a weapon. You have to be responsible from the age of 16 forward. When I was growing up, when you were growing up, when your father was growing up, there was something called NRA Safe Hunter Training. And I got it at the age of 12, right? And so what did I learn? I learned treat this firearm with great respect the way you do an automobile. And what if you trained every American on firearms, particularly younger Americans, and you said, this is a responsibility that you have pursuant to the Second Amendment to understand how to act responsibly. If that was a conversation point, whether you lived in a city or you lived in the countryside, what would happen is people's frame of reference, and then go deeper, talk about the cultural cohesion, talk about the importance of the family, talk about your obligations as an individual to the society. If we re-inculcated the values, we wouldn't have any of these actions going on that cause us to say, well, it's that, we need to outlaw this or we need to outlaw that. No. We need to stop outlawing things and start talking about what's here and what's here. And if you get those things right, the rest of it will all fall into place.
The rest of it will fall into place. Before we sort of give a wrap up, Bobby, I want to share a couple of videos with our folks. Lately, it seems that Biden, when I say lately, he hasn't been out a whole lot, but there are some clips that we've discovered where he really seems to not have mental capacity to do his job,
And so I'm going to say something outrageous. I have never been particularly poor at calculating how to get things done in the United States Senate. So the best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway, we're going to get a lot done. And if we have to, if there's complete lockdown and chaos as a consequence of the filibuster, then we'll have to go beyond what I'm talking about. Okay, hang on. Sorry. Oh, Ms. Kim.
Thank you, Mr. President.
And again, this is not about being mean or poking fun. I almost feel sorry for him. I don't understand why I feel like possible elder abuse, honestly, because if my husband was at this age and displayed the inability to communicate and speak clearly, and he sort of forgets what he's saying in mid-sentence, I'd be concerned, and I certainly wouldn't want that person to be put up, on a podium to have to talk about important things. So people recognize that Biden is probably doesn't have the mental abilities to carry out his job. And so they're suspecting that someone else is really running the White House. Who is it that really is calling the shots? And do you think that that Biden will last his entire 4-year term? Do you think, and I know that these are all, we're just projecting, we're sort of, weighing in on opinion here, but what might happen? What could happen?
That's a great question. And actually, Rebecca, there are several pieces I've written on that, just kind of laying out potential outcomes. Let's start with basics. We all respect the presidency. This was a very contested election. We all have some questions, or many of us have some deep questions about it. But look, Biden is the president of the United States, Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. And so we respect when that man, whoever he is, or a woman, steps to the microphone as the president, we respect the institution. And therefore, we are willing to say, look, we wish you well. We wish goodness for America. And you're the representative of America. So you better do a good job. Your statement is backed up by hundreds now, almost, of examples, and people, they've talked them away from the point of view of saying, well, he has a stutter, or well, he's a little slower, or well, he just tripped going up the stairs 3 times because it was windy, or he's, he got it almost right, or what he meant to say was, and so what I would tell people is, look, we've encountered situations. There have been about a dozen in the history of the United States where a president gets to a certain point in the term, and FDR was one of those. Garfield toward the end was one of those. There are situations that go back in time where others have to slot in until the constitutional process, if it's necessary, takes its course. I would just say to people, first, understand that in the broad scheme of things, others are obviously thinking about this internally as well as externally. Second, we can wish the president the best. I mean, let's hope that he gets more vitamins and turns himself around. But I'm not real sure that's going to happen. The bigger picture is, I am concerned, and the concern I have that's the biggest, is that the institutions, I think the institutions have a momentum that carry themselves forward. And that's true of every federal and state institution. And that's why we were able in the past to sort of compensate for maybe a fading out or a slight diminution of the power of a president to think about all these things. I would say that it does get to a nexus when either the 25th Amendment is called into play, which is essentially the relief of someone for failure of fitness, or the person resigns because they recognize, and this happens, let's say, on the Supreme Court, a justice resigns if they think they haven't really got the mental capacity or acuity any longer, or there are compensating mechanisms. I would say right now what I'm hoping is happening, and I have no inside knowledge, is that moderates, conservatives, maybe even some liberals on the right and the left, or that is to say in the Republican Party and in the Democratic Party, particularly national security leaders, are getting together and talking maybe with the Secretary of State, maybe with folks at the National Security Council, maybe within the Pentagon, and saying, look, let's do the contingency planning. Let's get ahead of any possible problem. The one thing I saw in Biden that was just disturbing is he is not a quick thinker any longer. He was once a guy that was very dynamic. I disagreed with virtually all his positions, but he was very dynamic, a guy to hear at a microphone. That is not him anymore. And you can just see it in everything he does. So I'm not saying that there's a lack of capacity formally now. I'm just saying that you have to plan for things. You and I know, Rebecca, that different people in our families, as things evolve, you have to plan for them, and you have to be prepared to make a smooth transition. And you need to be. So, will Biden suffice through 4 years? Let us pray that nothing big happens, that he does a great job in whatever it is he's trying to do, and he finally starts to talk to some Republicans. But let's wish him the best. At the same time, I'm a realist, and I see what you see, and I would bet you that 98% of Americans see it. And I think you have to plan for the future. The future, I mean, it's your business. I mean, you know how that is. We plan for the future because that is the only way to be ready for it
That's right.
And also to deter bad acts. I am concerned that China and Russia and Iran and North Korea are looking at this and saying, hey, this is our opportunity moment. And we need to say collectively, no, it is not your opportunity moment. This is the United States of America. And whoever is the figurehead or whoever is the person who's at the top, it's a country of, 300 million Americans who have a very clear idea of what they want. And they're going to defend freedom here and around the world.
Perhaps that's why they're not letting him out a whole lot, because, they don't want world leaders to perceive him as being weak. And they recognize that that's not the message that we want to send the rest of the world, that our president is fading. So I agree. I mean, we wish all good things for all people. But I guess one of the reasons why I have a hard time really feeling sorry for him is he doesn't feel sorry for babies in the womb in the 8th month. And I just goes back to that. And I think, in the 8th month, come on, he lacks compassion. His heart is hardened somewhere along the line. Something he just fails to see the truth in things. So this is wonderful. I love this. You've given us truth. You've given us history. I'm going to turn it over to you for some parting thoughts to our listeners. I also want to encourage people for a real pick-me-up to feel, to get a flavor of the great America that we live in. I want people to buy your book, Eagles and Evergreens. Are we still offering that via our website? How can people get to your book?
So if someone, for what it's worth, if someone renews their membership or starts a membership for 5 years with AMAC, they get it signed by me.
Very good. So I wasn't sure if that was still running. I'm excited it is. And for anybody here, you can give us a call if you don't get your book and you've signed on for 5 years. Give us a call. Call AMAC directly. But that's great, because it is one of those books that I found to be extremely uplifting, really, and makes you want to go back to simple living in a sense. Sometimes we get so caught up with the craziness of the world. And it's nice sometimes to, take that time to stop and smell the roses. And this book is beautifully written. So just wanted to share that. Parting thoughts, Bobby, for those that are listening. And I had some notes I wanted to read off.
I think maybe I can pull different pieces of our conversation together with a story that occurs to me from my past. One of the things that you just mentioned with respect to Biden was that, moral compass seems to have, he's abandoned his moral compass in many ways. And abortion is one way. We can say we're anything, right? We can say we're Christian. We can say we're Jewish. We can say we're a person of faith of any kind. But at the end of the day, it's what you do and what you really do that's consistent with your beliefs that makes that real. And another thing that you point out is the danger of socialism and kind of mentioning that, by really the luck of the draw, I've been very blessed to be in positions where I could see the world up close and personal and kind of understand it. And so there's a story that comes back. And then, of course, we talked about Reagan and and that wonderful period of time. And I am an optimist. And I think Reagan was an optimist for all the right reasons. And by the way, all of his optimism was borne out. So was Patton's optimism. So was Churchill's optimism. Those who live by that credo and make it real are able to look back and realize that it was worth keeping the focus on the far horizon and not losing that focus and not losing faith in that focus, even when the fog sucked you in. So the example that I thought I might, just quick story, it came to my mind because someone from my past reached back to me recently and reminded me of this era. There came a time when I was, so again, I grew up in this little town that's featured in that book, Eagles and Evergreens. And by some strange twist, and it really was a strange twist, my father never went to college, never got out of college. My mother largely raised 4 kids by herself on a school teacher's salary. Raising kids 4 kids on $12,000 seems crazy, but we didn't think it was crazy because it didn't seem abnormal. That's what we did. And my mom made it real. So coming out of that, by some strange twist, I ended up on a scholarship to Dartmouth, which I will forever be grateful for, which then triggered a scholarship to Oxford University, which was quite remarkable. And so what did I do when I got over there? First of all, my eyes were wide as saucers. That Europe is this crazy different place, and history goes back far more than 200 years. But I was very interested in Eastern Europe, which at the time was under the thumb of the Soviet Union. And by chance, I had a friend whose relatives were one of the 9 Solidarity leaders over in Poland. And so I went over there in 1983 and spent time with them, kind of seeing how the underground really operated. One of the most moving moments was being at a rally where Wałęsa and up in Gdańsk, where they marched from a church to the shipyard, and they were shouting and shouting, and I could hear in something they were shouting, since I didn't speak Polish. They were shouting something about Reagan, and I thought, what in the world? What are they saying about Reagan? That's a strange thing to be saying. Of course, the Western media wasn't there, and nobody covered it. And the person I was with leaned over and said, "They're saying hundreds of thousands of unfree people under the Soviet thumb were shouting, 'Reagan will show you. Reagan will show you. Reagan will show you.'" And
he was a great leader.
And he did. And what I'm really saying is we did. We defended freedom. We did not let the candle go out. And because it didn't go out, they knew they had a shot at lighting from our candle. And that's exactly what they did. And they are free today. So freedom and defending freedom really does matter.
Well, I'm going to leave my parting thought for folks, because, I love Reagan too. I mean, and his humor, he had wonderful humor. And so this is, my favorite. The trouble, Bobby, with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. I love that.
So very true.
It's so great. He had a way of sort of communicating that really broke a smile and helped keep things light. And I love it. There's a lot of stuff he said. Go ahead.
We need to just keep that spirit alive, and it really. He reflected it. He embodied it. Remember, this is someone who came out of his own adversity. His father was alcoholic, and he had to make his own way in the world. And having done that, he never lost sight of the fact that you can do anything if you put your mind to it. You can prevent bad things from happening. You can make good things happen. You just have to keep pushing through. It's it's that Patton philosophy applied with the Reagan humor. You just have
AMAC is pushing through, and we've got that in our hearts, in our bellies. We've got a fire in our belly, and we are so grateful for the over 2 million, 2.3, nearing 2.4 million AMAC members that have joined. We're getting a lot of work done. We're going to continue keeping you updated. So be sure to visit our website often. Soon, we'll be launching our AMAC News app. This is next week. I'll have a lot of detail around the AMAC News app. We are still in final testing mode, but this will allow folks to set their phone up for notifications. You can get important news as it's breaking. You can learn about our advocacy, what we're doing, what's working, what we're supporting, and what we're fighting back against. So again, just to everyone listening, I want to thank everyone for their AMAC membership. Don't forget to share this podcast with friends and family. Make sure you're getting our magazine. And I just want to thank everybody for tuning in today to AMAC's podcast, Better for America. And we look forward to having you back with us again next time.
Thank you for listening to the Better for America podcast. To learn more about AMAC and all it has to offer, visit us at www.amac.us.